WION reports. Hello and welcome to this very special broadcast from Ukraine. We are with the Ukrainian Reserve Forces as they train today, and we'll bring you up to speed with what's happening in this conflict as both sides, the Russian military and the NATO troops deployed in Europe, and of course the Ukrainian military getting ready for what may be an invasion. It's not just the armed forces who are training for war here. Even regular civilians who have become a part of the reserve forces are preparing to take on the mighty Russian military.
Mariana Zaglo, mother of three, is readying her long rifle. She signed up 2 years ago to be in the reserves and has undergone sniper training. This 52-year-old defense reservist insists she is willing to fight to defend her country.
I am a soldier now, and of course I must follow orders. Whatever the order is, I will follow it. I will not kill people, but I will protect my home.
Ukrainians, hardened by the years of conflict, are not panicking and are readying themselves in case the worst does come.
There are enough weapons for everyone. And if you want to get a weapon and go to war, the Ukrainian authorities will give it to you. It will not take much time. Personally, I went through 30 days of training and they gave me a machine gun.
The situation in Kharkiv, just 40 kilometers from the border, where tens of thousands of Russian troops have massed, feels particularly perilous. Kharkiv is Ukraine's second largest city, and people here have been preparing to abandon their civilian lives and fight back if Russian forces invade.
You need to be brave and strong if the enemy crosses our borders. The time has come to be protectors, not only warriors. May God bless you.
Our brothers have been killing us for the past 8 years. I feel rage. If behind the border they knew that here they will be rebelled, they would not dare come here because they would understand Grozny will seem like a childish thing.
Members of a Ukrainian paramilitary unit have begun training civilian volunteers in the capital city in case of an invasion.
The main task is to train the civilians in Kiev, and once we get enough Americans, we can form a unit and go to the front. But communication is key. If we don't have enough English speakers to form a coherent unit, then there's no point in deploying to the front.
The Georgian Legion, formed in large part by ethnic Georgian volunteers to fight against Russian aggression in Ukraine in 2014, now includes people of various nationalities.
I'm here for the reason why all these guys are here. At the same time, we're all here to fight against the Russian aggression, and the main thing is that we're here to support this country and to help them to get through this fight for their freedom and for their rights that they want out of this Russian tyranny and barbarian regime that they use, especially with the Ukrainian people that they have been murdering and doing a lot of bad things the last 8 years.
There are growing calls in Washington for the United States to support a potential Ukrainian insurgency. While Russia's forces are larger and more powerful than Ukraine's, an insurgency supported by US-funded arms and training could deter a full-scale invasion. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
The entire country of Ukraine has become a sort of a training ground, and urban warfare drills are being conducted in the town of Chernobyl as well, one of the most radioactive places in the world. Gunfire is echoing through the deserted streets and apartment blocks of Pripyat, and residents, of course, here were evacuated following the Chernobyl nuclear disaster of 1986. And that makes this place ideal for Ukrainian forces to train. But this training also comes with its own set of risks. Our next report tells you why.
This is Pripyat, an abandoned town in the north of Ukraine. Just over 10 kilometers away from the Belarus border, the ghost town is part of the Chernobyl exclusion zone, which means that no one lives here. Everyone was evacuated after the nuclear reactor disaster in 1986. But for the Ukrainian troops, this makes Pripyat perfect. They can train here. They can practice clearing armed attackers, target mortar fire and take on snipers in urban conditions.
The purpose of these exercises was to work out the scenario, the seizure of the premises and its liberation, what you saw by the National Guard. The second is to practice the work of a sniper couple. You've seen how it works.
But conducting exercises here has its own risks. Ahead of the training, workers with Geiger counters had to scan the route to ensure that there are no radioactive hotspots.
The control shows 0.18 microsieverts at a rate of 0.5. That is, it's absolutely safe to be in this area.
Ukraine's defense minister points to the difficult terrain as a major obstacle and the threat from radiation if they try to push through the exclusion zone.
I can confidently tell you that as of today, the concentration of Russian troops for exercises in Belarus is insufficient for an offensive operation.
For now, security has been stepped up around all nuclear reactors, including the Chernobyl site, which remains covered by a mammoth protective sarcophagus. But the troops here are not training to counter a full-scale Russian invasion. They are instead preparing for the threat from uniformed infiltrators, those who may seize buildings and stir unrest across the country. For Ukraine's authorities, this type of internal destabilization remains their biggest worry. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
The Ukrainian forces have got a shot in the arm. They're being supplied by the latest weapons and the NATO forces have been deployed in Europe. Here's a report from the Yavoriv military base in western Ukraine.
This is the Yavoriv military base in western Ukraine. Ukrainian troops are busy checking these brand new weapons. These anti-tank missiles, launchers and other military hardware have been sent by the United States.
Ця зброя дозволить зупинити і
бронеоб'єкти, їх вразити, і якщо буде бій в урбанізованій місцевості, вона дозволить розбити споруди, за якою буде ховатися ворог.
These weapons are part of a $200 million security package to help Kiev as it braces for a possible Russian military offensive. But the ground troops say they need more ammunition.
We need more ammunition, we need more practice. It is great we had the opportunity to train today, but we need to train every day. It was good to receive 2,000 weapons, but we need more. More weapons, more explosives and more targeting instruments, definitely.
In the face of Russia's latest build-up, some Western allies, led by the United States, have stepped up deliveries of arms to Kiev that could be used to ward off an attack. The United States has provided some $2.5 billion in military aid since 2014, and training from NATO allies, including Canada and Britain, has helped bolster battle readiness. Also, after years of conflict, Ukraine's forces are combat experienced and highly motivated. Despite the improvements, military analysts say Ukraine's military remains massively outgunned and outmanned by Moscow's vastly superior armed forces. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
The Russians have deployed more than 100,000 troops along the border and they've also set up field hospitals, blood banks. Of course, Moscow denies that it plans to invade Ukraine, but the Ukrainians are not taking any chances. Here's a report on the kind of drills being conducted by the Russian military in preparation for what could be an invasion.
Russia is busy holding multiple drills around Ukraine's border. Ground drills in Voronezh region, some 300 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, a series of exercises on ground, air and water. However, Moscow asserts that it has no intentions to invade Ukraine. But on ground, the big guns are booming. These live-fire exercises are held in western Belarus. This is Moscow's biggest deployment to Belarus since the Cold War. The presence of a large Russian force in Belarus has added to Western fears that Russia could be preparing to attack Ukraine on multiple fronts. But Kiev does not believe Russia is capable of mounting an invasion of Ukraine from the territory of Belarus.
As of today, along Ukraine's border with Belarus and the Russian Federation, we do not observe the formation of a strike group. Today, Russia's cumulative forces taking part in exercises in Belarus number several thousand, which is not enough to carry out an independent invasion.
Belarus says the exercises are needed due to military buildups in Ukraine, Poland and the Baltic states. The scale of the deployments and drills points to the ever-increasing alliance between the ex-Soviet neighbors. With the number of troops increasing, the situation remains tense. As world leaders continue to engage in hectic parleys and backroom diplomacy to avert a full-blown crisis. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Ukraine versus Russia is essentially a David versus Goliath battle. Look at any parameter, there is no comparison. The Ukrainians have 200,000 odd active military personnel. The Russians have more than 900,000. Same with reserve forces. The Russians have more than twice over. Artillery, Ukraine 2,000, Russia 7,500. Armored vehicles, 12,000, 30,000. Tanks, 2,500, 12,400. You look at any parameter, attack aircraft, 98 for Ukraine, 1,500 for the Russians. $6 billion is the defense budget of Ukraine. $61 billion is Russia's defense budget. So on its own, Ukraine is no match for the Russians, but that's not stopping these people from preparing for any eventuality. This is one of the groups of the reserve forces, the territorial defense forces, which are training for battle. They will be an auxiliary force to back up the infantry, and the Ukrainian Defense Ministry announced that they are actively recruiting in these forces, and they are looking to spread them across 25 regions. 150 battalions is what they're working on, with more than 600 troops in each battalion, and they're getting war ready.
Russia and Ukraine are the two largest countries in Europe. The neighbors were once part of the 15 Soviet republics, which made up the USSR. In 1991, following the collapse of the Soviet Union, Ukraine became an independent nation and distanced itself from Russia. Since then, it has grown into a potent military force, with the second largest military in the region, and second only to the Russian armed forces. But how capable are Ukraine's armed forces to tackle Russia in case of an invasion? Here's a head-to-head comparison. According to the 2022 Global Firepower Index, Russia has a military spending of $61.7 billion. That's 11.4% of its total government spending. In comparison, Ukraine was spending $5.9 billion on its armed forces, which equals to 8.8% of the Ukrainian government's entire spending. If we speak of military manpower, Russia has 900,000 active personnel. Ukraine has 209,000. Russia has 2 million reserve personnel. Ukraine has 900,000. If we speak of artillery or heavy military range weapons, Russia has 7,571. Ukraine has only 2,040. Next, we have armored vehicles, which combine operational mobility with offensive and defensive capabilities. Russia has 30,122 armored vehicles. Ukraine has 12,303. When it comes to tanks, the primary offensive weapon of any army, Russia once again has the edge. It has over 12,420 tanks, compared to 2,596 tanks in Ukraine's arsenal. When it comes to attack helicopters, Russia has 544 of them. Ukraine has just 34. And lastly, if we speak of fighter aircraft, the most potent weapon in air-to-air combat, Russia again outranks Ukraine. It has over 1,500 fighter aircraft. Ukraine has just 98. Russia outweighs Ukraine in almost every aspect. This may give an impression of an impending Ukrainian defeat in case of a war. But that may not exactly be the case. A number of countries are arming Ukraine to prevent the conflict from spilling over. This includes Estonia, which has sent Javelin anti-tank missiles to Ukraine. Latvia and Lithuania, who've sent Stinger anti-aircraft missiles to Ukraine. The UK, which has sent 2,000 anti-tank weapons. And the United States, which is deploying 3,000 troops in Eastern Europe to bolster Ukraine. To put it simply, in case of a war, Ukraine may not be as vulnerable as the numbers indicate. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
That'll be all on this special broadcast from Ukraine as we track the conflict from ground zero. We'll keep sending you reports and updates. This is Palki Sharma Upadhyay signing off with the WION team from Ukraine. It is a strategic fight, but for the Ukrainians, it's an existential battle.